I want to have a serious, real conversation with everybody who's watching and everybody you share this with that doesn't usually go well for a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand or agree. And so I'm going to try to do my best to explain it, not justify or excuse any poor behaviors. But this is a very controversial conversation. And I just want there to be some level of understanding, if possible, when it comes to this, so that people can have realistic expectations. That's all I want, is for people to have realistic expectations going into therapy with a therapist. Therapists are human, and humans disappoint us and make poor decisions. They make mistakes. They're not all good people. I don't think that justifies any poor behavior you may be experiencing. If your therapist is doing things you don't like, that's unethical, uncomfortable, whatever, fire them. Get another therapist. I will always be the person that says get a new therapist. Don't quit therapy, quit the therapist. But I also want people to be realistic when looking for a therapist, of what to look for and things you probably need to self reflect when choosing a therapist. So I don't want to invalidate anybody's experiences. I'm not blaming whatever your therapist did to you was your fault, or you should have done things differently. I just want you to be open minded again going into it. One, because I'm going to always promote people should go to therapy, but I'm also going to be honest of what people can expect or what may happen in the process of them going to therapy or trying to start therapy, because every experience will not be pleasant, even though I believe it should, right? Therapists are human, like I said, but for a lot of people in most fields, it's a job. I do believe that working in therapy, this is not something you should take lightly. You shouldn't do it if your heart's not in it. I think that about any job, honestly, but especially in a helping profession, when you're responsible for other people's mental health, you should want to do your job well, even if you're not passionate about it. Like, do the best you can. But I believe in good work ethic across the board. But I want you to understand, for the sake of humanizing therapists, because they could be put on a pedestal. Yes, they're professionals, but everybody who's a professional doesn't act like it, right? Doesn't make it right. But again, don't pedestalize anybody in any position, honestly, especially therapists. But it's a job, and we are not born as therapists. I would say there are certain things people can be born with that make them better therapists. I think a lot of my personality makes me good at what I do, and that's why I'm so successful. But some people are doing whatever will pay the bills, right? You went to school for one thing and you have a job for something. You got a job doing something else. A lot of you may be able to relate. In the same way, when I was a teacher, most people who teach did not go to school for education, let alone teaching. I didn't go to school to be a teacher, but it was a job that offered pretty good money to be 21, 22, to pay the bills, especially as a single mom. So I took the job, and a lot of people take the job because a job is a job, especially in this current economy. People should not just accept any job, especially if it's going to harm other people. Hear me clearly. I do not think anybody whose heart is not into the work, and when it comes to psychology and mental health, should be in the field. But there's people who exist because not everybody thinks that way. Not everybody is going to do what they love or do what they're passionate about. And that's just the reality. It's not right. It's the reality of it. And so I want you to just keep in mind that some people are just doing it. Maybe when they went to school, they thought that's what they wanted to do or loved to do. They got into it and decided it's not for them, but don't want to go back to school, or don't didn't do anything else. Or maybe they've done it for a while and they're burned out. It's They should quit and find another job. Totally agree with you. But keep that in mind, that you probably may meet a therapist that should be doing something else that you're now sitting with. And if you feel like they don't love what they do, they're not passionate, they're not good at it, it's not a good fit, it's uncomfortable, choose another therapist. It's and that's not the easiest thing. Finding a therapist, as hard as it is, or getting paired one with one. But I'm telling you, your process in therapy will be different if you get someone who wants to do it and is good at it. Okay. But just keep in mind, it's a job. A lot of people are doing jobs they don't love to pay their bills for all kind of reasons. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is the process to become a therapist. Just to be clear, especially with all the social media therapists going on, I every state is different. So I'm going to speak for me because I'm in Texas. I'm licensed in other states, as you can see. So I've done what I need to do that. But to become a therapist, it's not a matter of reading a couple books or writing a couple papers. For one, you have to be you have to get your master's degree. So that's a minimum of 6 years because usually it's 4 and 2. And that's what it did for me. I did 4 years undergrad, 2 years in master's, right? Graduate school. When you're in graduate school, when you're working on your master's near the end or the second half of it, you have to do what we call a practicum. Some people call it an intern, depending on the region. You have to do a practicum. In this practicum, you have to do therapy for free. So when we say practicum, think of practice. You have to do hundreds of hours without getting paid to qualify for graduation and to take the board test, like minimum requirements. And again, this is not even to be licensed fully. To get this degree, you have to complete hundreds, because it's 300 hours plus, depending on the school you go to, hundreds of hours of free labor practicing therapy. And because you're practicing and you don't have a license, that's why you can't make any money from it, because you don't know what you're doing. Now, if you're somebody who is seeking free or low cost therapy, you may be paired with a student. I'm not saying they don't know what they're doing, but it's free because they're not like a professional or expert in the field, because they're still learning. Now, that you can get a really good student, they're probably going to be very by the book. You can get quality care from a student. Just because it's free doesn't mean it won't be quality. They just don't have years of experience in this specifically, even if they've done other things before, but they are supervised by someone. I'm a supervisor, so they will be supervised from someone like me, who will sit in on these sessions and then have debriefings. What did the client say? What did you say? This is a time confidentiality may get breached. We call them staffings and or consultations, and they will say, I don't know what to say about this, or how do I approach this? How do I talk to someone who expresses this? How do I respond? We're talking about rapport. We're talking about facial expressions and body language. We're coaching them. So you do have someone who knows what they're doing, telling them what their best next move will be so you can get quality care. Okay. But it's practice. So we have to do hundreds of hours of practice for free. Then we graduate. After you graduate, then you can apply for your license as an intern, or I think it's now called an associate in Texas, your associate license, which means you have not completed all the hours needed to be licensed independently or have a full licensure, right? So you'll have an LPCA. It used to be LPC intern. So now that you've graduated, now you have to do thousands of hours, still supervised by someone who's already fully licensed. Thousands of hours. You can get paid for these hours. You probably won't get paid as much as someone who's fully licensed because you don't have your full license. Now you're out there in the field. Again, you may be receiving free or low cost therapy from an intern because they have not done all the hours required by the state, by law, to do this. So now they've already done hundreds of hours for free. Now you have to do thousands of hours for free or less money than a fully licensed clinician. And then you've already taken a test at this point. You've taken the test after you graduated. They say you know that the education or the knowledge. Now those thousands of hours is the application. You took the test to say you learned or studied well in school. Now you have to do 3,000 hours of pretty much tweaking your craft and um, improving your craft and getting better and finding your demographic. Thousands of hours, which you have a time limit. You have to spend at least 18 months getting these hours. You cannot do them quickly, so that it's not a rush job, to make sure you're actually doing them with fidelity. Someone has to sign off on these hours each week. You have to meet with your supervisor every week. There's so much that goes into it that by the time someone has their license, ideally they would have a lot of experience, to an extent, under their belt. And that's what separates us from, if you have a degree in psychology versus a licensed person. If you had a degree, you just studied what the textbook says. But real world application and the clinical side, you missed that part because you didn't do the hundreds and thousands of hours. Okay. And that's also what separates us from the coaches and the other professions. They're taking certification courses, they're doing a couple classes, reading a couple books, or watching YouTube. but they're not doing thousands of hours supervised by a professional in the field and doing well enough to be licensed fully through the state. And that's why we have so much liability. So it is not easy to become a fully licensed therapist. Do people cheat in school? Absolutely. Again, your therapist, if they're a licensed therapist, if they are a licensed therapist, they have at least done these things to become a therapist. Does that mean they're good at their job? No. They could be great test takers. They can be just compliant. They could be high achievers. High achievers. So while it took a lot of work to get there, it does not guarantee that they would be a great therapist or a great therapist for you. They could be a great therapist for somebody else because everyone has their own style. And so your experience with the therapist may vary from person to person. Um, and that's why I always preach have it being a good fit. And so you can have you what do I want to say? The experiences a therapist has can shape how they practice, but also can bring biases to the practice. So while you may shop for a therapist to an extent, you can interview them, but some things you won't know until you start working with them. And so you can have a poor experience with the therapist. So if that's you, I'm not saying like, oh, because they've done all this schooling and all these hours, they're great. No, because remember, they're human. That's the whole thing here. They're human. It could be just a job for them. And that's not fair to you. And that's why you should find another therapist. Um, the other thing is, I want to talk about is like what therapy is like. So, therapy, if I had to describe it a certain way, I describe it two ways. I like to describe it as the process of therapy is supposed to an extent rewire the brain. So it's functioning more optimally and that you're a more functional person. And so for years I would always explain it as think of therapy as a table that's empty. What you are going to do in therapy is come to this table in most experiences, depending on what you're in for. But in general, you're coming to this table, which is therapy, and you are going to take out everything is in your brain and put it on the table through processing, venting, dumping, the questions your therapist is going to ask. You're putting all this stuff on that table. Okay. On the table, it's probably going to be all tangled up. It's going to be a big mess. Think of a dump in a toy box, right? Stuff is all tangled up, knotted. Some of it's trash, some of it's not. But now through the process of therapy, you're going to take whatever this big pile of stuff is and you're going to sort through it. And this is particularly mostly true when it comes to like trauma, anxiety, depression, those type of things. You're picking this up and like, where did this come from? Why do I still have this? And this is your experiences, these are your feelings. Why does this piss me off? So you're able to find your triggers. Or why do I remember this so vividly? Why does this feel like it was yesterday? Why don't I like people who look like this or do this? You're picking up each thing and saying, what is this? What does it serve me? Do I need this? Does it still serve me? Have I fully resolved it? And now you're kind of pulling this little knot and separating that pile and putting things where they go and saying like, think of the movie Home and they're sorting through the feelings. Not Home, Inside Out. Yes. You're kind of sorting through and identifying and um compartmentalizing these experiences and emotions so that you're clear. Now you have a freer mind. But because you've now put it on the table, you usually automatically feel relief because like, who finally got that off my chest, got that out. But that's not the end of it. And people do usually want to stop after that. Now you need to comb through it. You need to go through all this crap because you've been carrying it. Some of this stuff doesn't need to go back in your brain. You need to throw it away. And other stuff, where it is in your brain, it needs to go somewhere else. It's misplaced because you went years without dealing with it. And that's why all this stuff is tangled up. The other way I like to explain therapy, depending on what you're there for, is the analogy of when you, and as you can tell, I work with a lot of anxiety and trauma. If you fall off your bike when you're 4, 5, and you get this scar on your knee, well, at that time, you're dramatic. You're falling on the floor, crying, yelling, people looking at it too long, you're going to start crying. People touch it, whoever's trying to clean it, put a band aid on it, it's the end of the world. miserable. Now you can't walk, you crawling, limping, the whole nine, right? It feels very real. It feels bigger than what it is. But this knee, every time you see it, it's now scabbing. It's healing. It should be. It's healing, right? And over the course of a few weeks or a few months, it's not bleeding anymore. Now it's a scab. Then the scab starts falling off. Now it's a different color. But over time, if you're treating it correctly, because sometimes we put band-aids on stuff that needs to be amputated, but that's a different conversation. That's a sermon. This thing heals and it no longer has that sensation. You can touch it, you can look at it, so much so that over the years that you kind of forget it's there until you see it, or somebody says like, "Oh, what is that scar from?" You're like, "Oh, that old thing. That's that's from when I fell off a bike when I was 5." But there's no emotional connection where you're crying and falling out anymore like you did when you are processing, because a lot of people confuse processing to talking. They're not the same thing. You can talk about something all the time, but when you process it and relive it and experience it and face the realities of what happened, then how you respond to it changes. And that can happen in therapy. It doesn't have to be in therapy, but that's part of what happens in therapy. And so then you process it. And so hopefully, whatever wounds you have emotionally and mentally, you can talk about it without crying now. It doesn't affect you anymore. This is no longer a trigger. Or even when you are triggered, you know how to respond to it because you have healthy coping skills to deal with it versus using your defense mechanisms, which I talked about in a different video. They're not the same thing. And so that's what the process of therapy is like. And that depends on what type of therapy you're doing, to be fair too. But essentially that's how it rewires the brain, is because you're going back through there, digging around and saying, what's going on in here? And figuring out solutions. Okay. So people also don't understand the difference in professions, because I've had clients who say, "Oh, yeah, I saw a therapist once, but they just gave me medicine." That was not your therapist. Okay. Therapists cannot prescribe medication. Therapists did not go to medical school. We did a lot of schooling, we did a lot of stuff, but we did not go to medical school. That is a psychiatrist. So there is a difference between psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists. Psychologists have a doctorate degree. Psychiatrists went to medical school. They are medical doctors. They went to medical school to study human behavior and mental health. And so they're the ones, they're the professionals when it comes to medication for mental health related disorders. And then therapists studied clinical stuff. So we studied all the theories and how to help you by talking about it, pretty much. Talking about it and give you practical applications, steps that you can do in day to day life to resolve this problem over time. Okay. If you should take medicine or just do therapy, you should talk to a professional. I cannot say which is better for your particular situation because I'm not going to be liable for whichever one you do. But different strokes for different folks. Everybody doesn't need to do both. And I will say, if you're getting medicine prescribed by a PCP or general practitioner or family doctor, I would strongly encourage you to see a psychiatrist, because, again, they're the people who went to school specifically for mental health related disorders, where your PCP studied kind of general stuff. And so they can give you something to keep you alive or steady, or to balance you out, which may be help. You may have found some relief, but it doesn't mean you're on the right medication for you. And it's not intentional. They're not trying to give you the wrong medication, but they have limited knowledge on the subject. So I'm telling you to go see a specialist, and a specialist when it comes to medication for mental health would be your psychiatrist, a psychiatrist if you don't have one. Therapists have general knowledge of medications, SSRIs, and things like that, but we didn't go to school to study medication. We studied the science behind mental health. So I hope that clears that up. If you're getting medicine from them, that's your psychiatrist, not your therapist. And psychiatrists and therapists are not the same people. They don't, because you're not in therapy. They're trying to see if the medication is working. You're at a doctor's appointment when you see them, so they're usually shorter after the first one. Sometimes people feel they're cold because people are expecting the same type of experience they have with their therapist. If you get a good therapist who cares, great. But they're doctors. They want to know if the medication is working or not. Your therapist is the one getting to know you in and out long term and can assist you with your process with psychiatry of like, make sure you tell your psychiatrist this. If you're having certain things, they may be privy to certain symptoms, to side effects you may be having to some of the medication. But again, we do the science and all the mental work, and they do the medical stuff. Okay. So hope that clears up some things. So when it comes to choosing your therapist, to bring this all to a close, I want you to consider that therapists are human. And for some of them, it's just a job. And if you feel like they don't love their job and they're not good at it, choose another one. I'm not justifying anybody's poor behavior. If they're falling asleep, if they're 20 minutes late, if they no showed or canceled you last minute, if they're inconsiderate, if they're disrespectful, if they're invalidating, they're human, but they don't get a pass. And I know people get in their feelings because they're like, well, as a therapist, you should be shoulda, coulda, woulda. But sometimes you're going to be disappointed because humans disappoint us. I'm sorry you've been mistreated and that people have not taken your concerns seriously to help you and have not been invested in your journey. But please find another therapist, okay? So, when it comes to finding another therapist, here's some things I want you to consider. Just because they look like you doesn't mean they're the best fit. Someone looking like you, having the same background, speaking the same language, being in the same community, from the same country, none of that guarantees they will be the best therapist for you, let alone a good therapist in general. Nothing. I understand and support fully. I got shredded to pieces years ago on the internet talking about this. I understand wanting to choose something based on comfort, wanting someone to understand you. But you also want to be careful that you're not choosing someone who will bring their bias into it. Just because they look like you does not guarantee they're the best fit or even a good therapist in general. Will you may feel more comfortable? Yes. And I think if you can get a great therapist who gives you that comfort because they look like you, great. But I also want you to be open minded that someone who looks nothing like you can also probably help you. They can also understand you. Not all the time, but everybody who looks like you may not understand either because y'all could have grown up differently. Their experiences could be differently. So they still may see the world very different from you. So do not pigeonhole I must have this kind of therapist. If you're in the LGBTQIA community, that you need a therapist that is also that. Y'all are not friends. You're not finding a best friend. You want a safe space. And someone who can offer safety can look like anything. And I'm not saying don't find someone who looks like you. Don't mishear me or misunderstand me. I'm saying do not only go by those things. Okay? Do you feel safe? Do you feel heard? Do you feel seen? Are you comfortable? Is this environment in which you can be vulnerable? Even if it's difficult, you're going to be talking about stuff you don't want to talk about or say out loud or admit to be true in general. I'm talking about beyond that. If this person you feel like doesn't even ask follow up questions, if they're dozing off, if they're on the phone, if they're doing other things, they're distracted, whatever, they're not a good fit for you. And they can look just like you, they can speak the same language as you. Hopefully you can find someone who looks like you that is better, but if not, be open to trying other people. If when it comes to your mental health, I don't want you to prolong doing something you need to do that can help you because you're stuck on these things like optics or aesthetic. Okay. And I have a lot of clients who chose me because I'm black, because I have locks, because I am whatever, and things work. But do I work with everybody? Absolutely not. And I don't want to work with everybody because I'm only me and I can only offer so much diversity that I should not be a good fit for everybody in the world because I don't even agree with everybody in the world. And I think we can end this on that point of therapists are not supposed to be do harm. Just because they're human does not justify enabling or promoting bad behavior or inappropriate behavior. I do not want you to accept inappropriate or disrespectful behavior from anybody. A therapist should hold you accountable whether they agree with you or not, just based on how you treat people. Because we don't want people to mistreat you and we don't want you to mistreat other people. Okay? And so therapists should be holding you for the safety of the world. You can believe whatever you want to believe, you can have your opinions, but when it comes to how you show up in the world and treat other people, your therapist should be holding you accountable. Not because they believe what's right or wrong. This is not a matter, it's about due diligence. And I cannot send you back into the world harming a group of people because of your personal beliefs. Then I'm liable. So there's a difference between supporting someone and understanding someone. I can see, why you might not like them, why you don't associate with a certain group of people. I can hear you all day and be like, "Oh, I you've had bad experiences. I'm sorry to hear that. Anybody in your shoes would be frightened to interact with those." but I'm not gonna be like, damn right, go do XYZ to this people, and yeah, F all those people, and you have a right to mistreat these people because I draw the line there. Hopefully your therapist does too. So I hope this helps. If you have other questions, let me know. Because that was a lot, and I talk fast, and I probably was all over the place a little bit, but that's me. So if you need somebody a little more level-headed and cohesive, I'm not the person. Because who works for me, and my clients appreciate it and love it because they understand it because it makes them feel not alone for how their brain works. Okay, and that's all I want to do is normalize that we're all different and see things different, and regardless of how different you are, you can get good help. You just need help finding the right person for you, and I hope you do that.